Good morning Europe and good afternoon Indonesia. Welcome to this webinar on accelerating sustainable supply chains in Europe with a specific focus on palm oil. First, a technical note. There will be room for questions, and throughout the webinar you can type in your questions in the chat section on the right hand side of your screen. We will gather them and come back to your questions after the interventions from our speakers. The webinar consists of 3 parts. First, we'll focus on our governments and what is happening with the keynote speakers. Second, we look at what we can do beyond supply chains, what is a systemic impact and how can we have a systemic approach. We conclude that section with a call for cooperation. And last but not least, of course, there is room for questions. Without further ado, I give the floor to our president for his welcome message. Mr. Thiry, you have the floor.
So I want to warmly welcome everybody to this webinar. It's very nice to be with such many people here. And it's probably because many people, like all of us, are very ambitious about the transition to 100% segregated palm in Europe, which is very important to reach as soon as possible. And yeah, we have different problems, we have different companies, but the goal is the same. We want to go forward to more green raw materials, more green agricultural situation everywhere, and give to the population greener and greener products in the near future. So it's a great ambition, and let's share together this webinar to go in this direction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thiry. And our first keynote speaker is Eva de Bleeker, Secretary of State for the Budget and Consumer Protection, with a video message.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to extend my best wishes for the new year to all of you. Secondly, I would like to thank the organization for the invitation to talk about a subject I'm passionate about: sustainability in the food supply chain. One of the jobs I had before my appointment as State Secretary for Consumer Protection was working as an Economic Affairs Officer for CIAA, currently known as Food Drink Europe, the Association of the European Food and Drink Industry. But also during my work at the European Commission, I was involved in ensuring transparency and sustainability in the food supply chain. So my strong interest in food is not only gastronomical, but also derives from a professional background. The newly formed government under the Liberal Prime Minister Alexander De Croo has an ambitious agenda. It includes a transition towards a sustainable economy, which includes sustainable consumption and the sustainability of our food chain. At the European level, as well as the international level, important steps are taken in order to increase sustainability in supply chains. It is important that countries, industry, agriculture and fisheries, as well as consumers, join forces. As you know, 17 Sustainable Development Goals were established by the United Nations in 2015. At the start of 2021, we have 10 years left to achieve those ambitious goals. One of these SDGs, SDG 12, is about ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns. Both the EU and its member states are working relentlessly to take action in this domain. Not only because Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development urges them to do so, but also because it fulfills the growing demands of consumers for sustainably produced food. In this context, it is important to mention the European Farm to Fork strategy, which is at the heart of the European Green Deal, aimed at making food systems fair, healthy, and environmentally friendly. Consumers today are more and more aware of the impact of their consumption on our planet and society. They want to know exactly where products come from and what the impact of production is on the environment and the climate, and in which conditions the products are produced. Rightfully so. I myself am a strong believer in transparency. Not only from the perspective that consumers have the right to know what they are buying and eating, but also because I am convinced that transparency will lead to better and more sustainable choices by consumers, and that this will be beneficial for society as a whole. At high school, I studied ancient languages, and I don't fully agree with Socrates when he states that knowing right from wrong always leads to doing the right thing, but I do believe that knowledge and understanding is the first crucial step towards making the right choices. That's why increasing transparency in our food chain is essential for making our food production and consumption more responsible and more sustainable. This need for transparency and traceability in our food chain continues to gain in importance because of the growing complexity and globalization of supply chains. As a Secretary of State for Consumer Protection, I attach great importance to increasing transparency towards consumers on the origin of products and the circumstances under which they were produced in order to allow consumers to make well-considered choices. I am fully aware that this is not always straightforward for the industry and that this requires companies to invest in sound traceability, certification, and sustainability accounting and auditing systems. Yet I am convinced that this is in the interest of companies themselves as well, not only from a sustainability perspective, but also from an economic and strategic point of view. An important question is how this information can be provided to the consumers in a comprehensible manner. The most simple and direct way to provide such information on the supply chain is by providing it on the package. Yet we all know that today already a lot of information needs to be presented on the packaging label. Ingredients, nutritional information, expiry dates, etc. So how to present information on the supply chain and the production circumstances of a product in a clear manner, which will make an informed choice easier and not more complicated, without overloading the packaging with text. There, the use of labels can be an interesting option. Today, a plethora of labels exists related to the sustainability of products from an environmental and social perspective. I believe eco-labels alone account already for more than 450 labels worldwide. Often they are sector or product specific, but also retailers have their own labels. When it comes to labels, less is more. For consumers, it is impossible to recognize each of these labels, let alone know what they stand for. That's why I would like to start a broad debate with different sectors and retailers to reduce the number of labels in order to increase consumer knowledge of and confidence in sustainability labels. A smaller number of labels can enable the industry, but also governments, to enhance the trustworthiness of labels and fight greenwashing. The greatest challenge in this context, and the one that will determine the success of the initiative, is guaranteeing that labels honor the pledges made to consumers, making sure that labels reflect the values they promise. Providing misleading information or making claims and promises that are not met will destroy consumers' confidence in the label and in the industry. Using labels merely as a window dressing without sound commitment to walk the talk is unacceptable. Surely many trustworthy labels exist already, and I am convinced that an efficient and clear system of sustainability labels can be achieved through cooperation between producers and retailers. Clearly, government has an important role to play as well. It is essential that the accuracy of the information provided to consumers is verified, be it general information or the information behind a label, including related to the sustainability of the product. Therefore, we are strengthening inspection services in this area, not just in terms of manpower, but also making them smarter and more efficient. Some weeks ago, I visited Colruyt Group, who together with Expectrum, a startup, developed a handheld scanner that can analyze the composition of products in a few seconds. From some products, it can even detect their geographical origin. Such innovative applications will allow us to verify quickly and on a large scale the information provided by the producers and the retailers. Innovation will help us to increase the traceability of products, of the raw materials, or elements of the product within the supply chain. I would like to finish with a last important message for both public and private sector. It is a call for cooperation. We live in a complex country with different political levels and overlapping responsibilities. Federal, regional, and even local authorities are all committed to enhance sustainability in the food chain and strengthen consumers in their choices. In order to make significant progress, more cooperation between those different governments is needed. The same holds for the private sector. Confrontation and conflict rarely leads to improvements. I believe both public and private sector have a common interest in protecting consumers, provide them with all the information they desire, and guarantee that this information is reliable. That's why I invite producers and retailers to come with propositions and solutions to the challenges we are facing. I'm sure that together with the industry, we will achieve our goals and we will make our food chain more sustainable. In 1964, Bob Dylan sang, "Times are changing." Well, it's clear that currently times are changing in terms of consumer preferences. While price and quality of products remain and will remain an important factor in determining the purchase of a product, the impact of the production of the product and the impact of the product itself on the environment and on society becomes more and more important. Consumers want to make responsible choices, and I'm happy to see that more and more companies and industry sectors are being more transparent and are willing to provide the consumer with the requested information, and that they are setting up systems to do so. Transparency is all about empowering consumers and give them more responsibility. I wish you all a very interesting and pleasant day, a happy, healthy and successful 2021, a good dose of commitment to sustainable production and consumption, and I hope to meet all of you as soon as possible, face to face. Thank you.
A clear call from our Secretary of State to listen to consumers, but it's not only consumer side, of course, that we need to listen to. We also have to take into account what happens on the supply side. From Indonesia, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia here in Brussels. Mr. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Terima kasih, Pak Jelmen. Thank you very much. Good morning in Europe and good afternoon in Indonesia. It is an honor and privilege for me to be here today at the Belgian Alliance for Sustainable Palm Oil webinar on accelerating sustainable supply chains in the EU. I would like to extend my appreciation for Pak Jelmen, Secretary General of Belgian Alliance for Sustainable Palm Oil, for inviting me to deliver keynote remarks in this webinar. And Belgian Alliance for Sustainable Palm Oil and the Embassy of Indonesia have always maintained a close collaboration in promoting sustainable palm oil. This convening of the webinar is timely and relevant for several reasons. First, last week, I presented my credentials to His Majesty King Philippe and highlighted the importance of
Mr. Jelmen.
Palm oil during the discussion in enhanced economic cooperation between Belgium and Indonesia. His Majesty King Philippe emphasized the importance to finalize the negotiation of Indonesian European Union Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Second, the ASEAN-EU Joint Working Group on Palm Oil was launched on 1st December 2020, and the Joint Working Group will address the development and challenges faces in sustainable vegetable oil production, ensure environmental within the palm oil sector are mutually understood with the view to addressing them in holistic, transparent and non-discriminatory manner. And the third, sharing relevant information on sustainable vegetable oil production and contribute towards a mutual understanding of sustainability criteria in the process of certification for vegetable oil. Third, an increasing trend of food products sold in supermarkets and bio stores with a label of no palm oil or palm oil free. negative health and environmental impacts in its campaign against palm oil pose a serious concern. In view of this recent development in Europe, this may create a norm setting on the health issue of palm oil. Someday, maybe other country will follow similar action in doing this unfair practice. And actually labeling no palm oil, contrary basically to the purpose of EU food information regulation and EU directive food labeling, that is to enable informed choice about food they consume as part of balanced diet. Ladies and gentlemen, with the current European Union policies such as Green Deal, EU Forest Strategy, Farm to Fork Strategy pose a great challenge for Indonesia and other countries exporting commodities. For this, government, private sector, relevant association, institution have to work together in assessing opportunity and challenges of sustainable vegetable oil production and consumption. For this, it is very important to focus cooperation on the implementation of the sustainable supply chains. Similarly, in the context of sustainability, Indonesia has established a timber legality assurance system recognized by the European Union through voluntary partnership agreement. It was signed in 2013 and entered into force on the 15 November 2016. This is a model of concrete cooperation between Indonesia and the EU on sustainability supply chains. In concluding, I wish you have a productive and fruitful deliberation in this webinar. Thank you very much.
Partnerships and working together, of course, and Europe is also taking action. As we know, there are steps being taken towards the EU due diligence system, which as Belgian Alliance we support. It's a very important step to creating a level playing field. But the EU also looks at member states, and they call upon member states to take action. To elaborate and to give a clear example of what can be happening there, we have now Ms. Salima Kempenaer. Ms. Salima Kempenaer is International Relations Officer for Belgium with a specific focus on biodiversity. Ms. Kempenaer, you have the floor.
So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present the approach that we would like to have in Belgium when it regards sustainable supply chains. I'm Salima Kempenaer. I've been working for several years now in the Federal Ministry of Environment. And I'll present you the strategy that we call Beyond Food, which is a strategy for the federal government to go towards sustainable food supply chains. Let me explain first how it started. Our department focuses on biodiversity preservation and sustainable use. So that's the perspective from which we entered into the discussion around sustainable supply chains. And so we all know that the trends are not good about biodiversity loss. And from there, we open to the fact that it's not only about biodiversity preservation, it's not only about deforestation, it's really about creating sustainable, resilient supply chains that support well-being and prosperity for both producer and consumer countries. So in Belgium, we've had several initiatives that go towards creating sustainable markets. I won't get into the details of every one of them. One that is particularly important that inspired the Belgian strategy, Beyond Food, is the Beyond Chocolate Partnership, which is a partnership for the cocoa and chocolate sector in Belgium. And it's a public-private partnership. that covers the whole, all the stakeholders in Belgium, and that aims at creating sustainable supply chains for cocoa, but also in cooperation with the producer countries, and trying to invest in innovative and sustainable projects in the producer countries, with, of course, ambitious targets for deforestation, but not only. The other major objective of this initiative is to have a living income for the producers in the producing countries. So that's the initiative that inspired us to go beyond only chocolate and extend that approach to the whole food sector. And of course, there's the EU context with the Green Deal and all the proposals in the Green Deal. And based on that, we drafted a proposed strategy that we call Beyond Food. And this slide is really important. It's to show that it really goes beyond only imported deforestation. We started from biodiversity and imported deforestation, but the goal is really to reach sustainability for producer countries and for consumer countries. And that means not only tackling biodiversity and imported deforestation, but also working together for human rights, working together to fight pollution, working together to achieve sustainable objectives in the field of gender equality, etc. So it's really not only about deforestation, but really about sustainability and reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. And below in the slide, I added something to show that it's not only about cleaning our supply chains in consumer countries. It's really about working with the private sector, with producer countries to achieve sustainable supply chains. But it's only one piece of the major transition that we have to make, everyone in the EU, but not only, to achieve sustainable food systems. To achieve that, we also have to work on, of course, our own production practices in the EU, and we also have to work on our diets. So it's just to give you a global perspective, an overall perspective on the approach in Belgium. It's really not only about targeting one issue, which is imported deforestation. It's to work on this in combination with all the other challenges that we have and that we face to achieve a transition towards sustainable food systems. And sustainable supply chains are, of course, a major objective. Maybe to give you some examples of what we would like to do within this strategy, we try to have a very comprehensive approach, trying to work on every tool that we have to achieve that objective. One of them, of course, is to try and have a very clear and ambitious EU framework. But not only working on the legality of the framework, but also working with, again, all the stakeholders and the producer countries to go beyond what's legal or not, and create together supply chains that are beneficial for both producers and consumers. And for that, we will try and replicate the Beyond Chocolate initiative to other commodities, and palm oil is one of them. But we also aim at working on soy, for example, coffee, etc. So really, our approach is to work on the major commodities that we import and that we actually need, and have a very cooperative, collective approach to creating sustainable supply chains. Other tools that we will try and use are, for example, public procurements, etc. We will try and use also, of course, diplomacy, but it's really about using all the possibilities of dialogue to build sustainable supply chains.
Thank you very much. It's, as you present, indeed a lot of actors coming together, and for government it goes from development cooperation over consumer relations, green public procurement. There's a lot of parts in this puzzle that need to come together. A lot of parts in this puzzle, not only for government but also as industry. If we're trying to understand this, we look traditionally at our own supply chain, but there's a lot happening also beyond supply chains. The supply chain and that one plantation or that one company that is sourcing from palm oil from a specific region is just one part of the puzzle. Trying to open that view and trying to understand what happens beyond our own supply chain is quite complicated. It's not always clear on how to act in different regions, different areas. An important way forward and a new tool that has been developed in the last 5 to 10 years is a landscape approach. A landscape approach looks at an ecosystem and the natural boundaries of that ecosystem and tries to develop that ecosystem and move forward towards more sustainability. On this landscape approach, I'm very pleased to have here Babasola Olajide with a clear example on the landscape approach from IDH. Mr. Babasola, you have the floor.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Babasola Olajide. I'm Program Manager at IDH for National Initiatives for Sustainable and Climate Smart Oil Palm Smallholders, NISCOPs. I would be presenting this topic on the webinar for Accelerating Sustainable Supply Chain in Europe, looking at a landscape approach. This NISCOPs program is actually being coordinated and implemented by 2 organizations, which makes it quite interesting, Solidaridad and IDH. And in terms of accelerating sustainable supply chain in Europe, we all know, at least most of us are aware, that Europe does not produce palm oil. So what do we mean by accelerating sustainable supply chain in Europe? Basically, what we are talking of is, since Europe does not produce palm oil, we are looking at where palm oil is being produced from, and we are talking of Indonesia, Malaysia, and in Africa, we look at Nigeria and Ghana. Now, what is NISCOPs? This is a government-to-government initiative which came to into view in 2018 by the government of Netherlands, and the whole objective is to demonstrate that climate smart oil palm cultivation by smallholders, to build capacity of smallholders and local institutions in 4 countries, which I already mentioned: Indonesia, Malaysia, Nigeria, and Ghana, and to support development of 25 landscapes mechanisms, and lastly, to contribute to the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. Memorandums of understanding were signed with the government of Indonesia, Malaysia, Nigeria, and Ghana. For IDH, it's good to note for everyone that we operate in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Nigeria, same as Solidaridad, but with Ghana inclusive. The inception phase started in 2019, and we are currently in the implementation phase running into 2023. Now, it's good to have government-to-government agreement, and NISCOPs operates under a bilateral government agreement. For example, in Nigeria, we have the NISCOPs National Forum, NNF, which was established to bring about key stakeholders across the civil society, the public, and the private sector, which from various speakers before me have been highlighting on. Memorandum of understanding was also signed with the Malaysian Palm Oil Board in Malaysia, and same with Indonesia as well, which brings about relevant key stakeholders to come out about forming the steering committee, and in Malaysia, the technical committee. In Europe, bringing it back to Europe, we know that 86% of palm oil used in Europe in 2019 is sustainably produced. 74% of palm oil imported into Europe is RSPO certified. And when we talk of palm oil in Europe, we look at the highest certification body, that's RSPO. In NISCOPS, we believe that RSPO indeed has raised the bar. However, certification only reaches 20% of farm. Most markets still price sensitive. Smallholders across the various countries producing palm oil producing countries still lack support to produce legally, and palm oil prices keep dropping. So we believe now is the time to raise the floor. And how do we raise the floor? Our inclusive approach actually speaks to protecting and restoring forest and peatlands through corporate and community and local government action. We aim to strengthen rural economy through production quality, improve business skills and organization of smallholders, develop constructive relationship between palm oil producing and consuming countries. So local ownership of at different administrative level, national government identifies key performance indicators, and then implementation is done with subnational governments. However, one thing that is good to note is that we do focus on impact, and our impacts are based on the KPIs. The KPIs are formed based on the food and agricultural concept of climate smart agriculture, which, as you might have read from the acronym, climate smart oil palm smallholders. And what do we mean by climate smart agriculture? We're talking about climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and improved livelihood and productivity for these smallholders, targeted at smallholders. And then also we talk about partnership and collaboration, involvement from the value chain, co-investment and compliance. Where are we active? We are in, NISCOPS is active in Indonesia, as I said, as one of the pilot countries. For IDH, we are in Aceh and North Sumatra. We focused in Aceh Tamiang and Aceh Timor, and on North Sumatra in Langkat and Tapanuli Selatan. Same as Solidaridad, as you can see in the screen, on your screen here, from East Kalimantan and West Kalimantan, and the various regions in which Solidaridad is active in. Same also for Malaysia. For IDH, we are in Sabah, and Solidaridad is in Sarawak, Johor, and Perak. In Nigeria, we are in 4 states, 6 states total. Solidaridad is in 4 states and IDH is in 2 states, Ondo State and Edo State. Our approach, actually, our methodology is to link national policies to local landscape planning and climate smart agriculture, as I mentioned, agree on science-based productivity for adaptation, mitigation, and key performance and the targets. We aim to build implementation consortia with local mills and farmers supported by local governments to report transparently on performance against KPIs and to replicate this in other landscapes and countries. Our key approaches actually do include development of a green growth plan, which we have in Ondo and Edo states we've developed. Also for Aceh currently and North Sumatra, we have a green growth plan developed. Then we go into forming what we call the PPI Compact. That's the Production, Protection, and Inclusion Compact with local actors on ground. And we go about with, in Aceh, we already have a pilot project called the Verified Sourcing Area. Basically, in a high, to give it on a quick summary, it's connecting markets with the landscapes, with local actors in the landscapes. And currently, previously we used to call it the Verified Sourcing Area, but it's now changed into Source Up. So connecting markets with the landscapes. We look at one of our also key approaches is carbon finance, green investments, turning multi-stakeholder pledges into field level actions. In rounding up, I would say that the political momentum is at a high level. We realize that governments have a role to play. And given the fact that NISCOPS actually came into fruition through the Amsterdam Declaration Partnership, it's also good to note, as previous speakers have spoken on, that Belgium recently just joined the Amsterdam Declaration Partnership. And we do believe that the Belgian government also do have a strong role to play in NISCOPS. However, we've seen that commitments to end palm oil deforestation by 2020, we're already in 2021, there is still more to do. Therefore, actions on the ground still lag behind, and trust is needed moving forward. I will leave you with some of our activities currently. Just as I said, we formed first farmer groups in Aceh. The aim is also to replicate. We currently have in Aceh, Tamiang, we have a pilot project of the verified sourcing area, and we do aim to actually replicate this across the whole of Aceh. And also, lastly, is that we are also currently active in forming the smallholders in Aceh, Tamiang. And with that, I round up and I thank you for your attention. I look forward to your questions. This is just on a high level, but I do hope if you have more details, if you need more details, I'm ready to provide it. And my email and contact are listed above. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It's a very, very beautiful project and also quite complicated trying to bring all these stakeholders together. As Belgian Alliance, we have also responded to the current issues and the current challenges for our supply chain following the COVID crisis. And we have introduced together with PwC a project proposal under the EU relaunch budget. Presenting this project proposal, we have here today Christoph Vanderstricht. He works for PwC. He's got extensive experience in sustainable value chains, worked in over 40 countries on more than 80 projects. Christoph, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the honor and the pleasure as well to be present and to share with you and the audience our intake and our views on how actually to realize the transition towards sustainable palm oil value chain. I will mainly discuss the specificity of indeed what we have proposed in the framework of the relaunch program, and that's actually talking about connected, inclusive ecosystems. And I hope this works. Nope. Okay. Your screen sharing. Normally. Okay, so. Well, first of all, I think palm oil, I would put it positively, because palm oil has been, I would almost say, diabolized, and His Excellency Ambassador actually put it, I think, very correctly. But I think if you look at palm oil as a product, as an ingredient, actually it has the intrinsic capability to be one of the most valuable and sustainable ingredients actually to satisfy worldwide needs in the next decades, not only in food, but also in other applications. Now, of course, the practices used to match that increasing demand have had a devastating impact, and we all know about the forest peatland losses. Farmers remain locked into value erosion market models. No or little possibility for secure diversification and structural poverty, which remains an issue, especially for, as Babasola said, for small farm holders. But the upside is actually that palm oil actually is a solution. Yeah, also because climate change will have a considerable impact on farming. There will be a reduction of 44% of arable land by 2025, and also the content is actually there's an increase of population, 1.2 billion people more in 2030. Those people also are referred to, it's probably other people, but anyway, it's also the middle class will also increase with that number, mainly in South America and Asia. All those people need products, need services. And actually I mean, as people on the planet, to put it like that, we'll have to be able to satisfy their needs. Obviously, we can improve the needs, as Mrs. Kempenaer said, in actually educating, adapting, and whatever. But anyway, there will be an increase of need of resources on less land, and then actually need to look at the best yield. Now, the question, of course, is how do we do that? Now, we all know that integrating environmental, social, and governance dimensions are critical, imperative, and crucial building blocks for the palm oil supply chain to build a sustainable future for all. Where in the past, mainly the choices by companies, by governments, by everyone, by farmers is basically focused on two things, basically the customer and the economic value. We do see that those two parameters not only are sufficient to create a sustainable world in which we basically have defined the different parameters, if I can say so, the goals and the SDGs. So actually it means that when you look at the supply chain and the way how we look at supply chains, when we build them across the globe for a lot of companies, which are actually, I'm happy to see that they're present here as well. When we build those supply chains, we connect what? We connect the supplier T-3, T-4, whatever, with the OEM, which is a producer, the farmer, if it's a food, and then actually up to the consumer. And working through the technology, which we have developed on this, which we have developed, yeah, partly we have developed, actually we see that there's an opportunity. Yeah? There's an opportunity to basically create, integrate all those dimensions, realizing all those SDGs into one model, or let's say in building ecosystems. So when you look at the current status, and there has been plenty of things stated, the majority of the palm oil companies have already published, as you know as well, voluntary anti-deforestation policies. We have the Amsterdam Group. We have public funding and subsidies from governments, which try to help the local situation wherever it is needed, wherever the money is available. We do see this is great commitment, work, and effort, but in most cases, it's one arm's length cooperation. It's funding of pilots and one-to-one projects. And sometimes there's an establishment and scale up of pilots, but in many cases, it's limited in time. And what we do see as well is that the moment something goes bad, then basically that money fades away. This is well in relation to government as actually company support. Basically, that leaves the people which are depending or which we are working with in the cold or in the heat, depending on which part of the planet they are. But anyway, they are without further resources. So basically, they're dropped back, pushed back in the initial state. And that's actually not what we are aiming at, because we want to have a sustainable structural approach. What we see as well is that access to market and economic resilience for small farmholders remain critical, as also was stated by Babasola. Transparency and traceability remains problematic. Now, transparency and traceability is actually an issue for everyone. And that's actually why we believe that digital ecosystems, developing them together, will basically solve that item for the people which are inside, the organizations which are inside that ecosystem, which will probably also create, let's say, I'm not going to say a shield, but actually going to create transparency again against the shooting from the hip social media and diabolization. I strongly believe that this do not contribute in any perspective in tackling and solving complex issues. It merely demotivates the ones that are working together. And something I think we have learned a lot, not from Asia, not from Europe, but from a little bit to the West, at least from our side. Well, it's a ball anyway, but is actually that there are no simplistic solutions that sustainably solve complex challenges and opportunities in a globalized world. You cannot go for simplistic, yes, no, polarization and populistic measures and statements. They basically are one-dimensional ones, because they basically kill or they basically create bigger problems. Now, what does it mean? It means that we need to rethink the dynamics and models that structure the agribusiness and palm oil in order to transform them into sustainable value chains. Now, the question is, how do you do that? We believe that means that there's a shift focus from being largely one-directional to a connected, inclusive ecosystem. Now, what does that mean? It basically means that we're going to think and work differently. It means that I will first say BASP and PwC. So we entered that proposal, as was already mentioned by Jelmen, to create connected, inclusive ecosystems for palm oil that will enable and create a lot of things. But of course, that all depends on the people that will decide in the setup, in the governance model, and the projects that will be run through such an ecosystem. But it will deliver the possibility to create integrated, inclusive, connected partnerships. It will create structural shared value creation. It will reduce direct economic financial dependencies. It will protect the forests and habitats. Why? Because if you work together with a farmer to help him or her to work according to the set of criteria, which means that You cannot just simply cut forest or put it into fire or drain peatland, because you have to answer an increase of demand, which is actually creating more value. Then actually the question is, how do we make sure that one, either the yield is there, or two, how can we make sure that by the push of the market and by the fact that there is no resilience, that this thing is not going to happen. Now, there are different ways to do that. But what is important is that if a farmer and a company, a producer and a supplier is part of that ecosystem, that actually that within that ecosystem, everyone is going to work according to the rules set out by that ecosystem. So basically it means that for a company, it means a company which is importing palm oil, that in their procurement procedures, they will basically create that they will only work with farmers which are part of the ecosystem. From another side, to avoid and to create management control, it's also important that the control tower concept, which will just come, will actually be a repository of the information. So for instance, if farmer number one, which is situated in whatever region in Indonesia, as an example, that actually he normally has so much acres. That basically means that normally there's going to be output of so much, more or less. Now, if you see that it's doubled without actually anything else, then actually there's an issue. So basically we can take action about that. The management, the control tower can take action, and it's not going to kill trade. It's actually going to create people sitting together, working together, because everyone wants to have increased yield. The farmer wants to have an increased yield, and probably the customer also wants to have an increased yield. And the question is, how are we going to realize that? Okay. It's going to lead to E2C traceability, etc. More still palm oil, better information for customers, governments, and other stakeholders, increased customer intimacy, upscaling the current investments and joint portfolio projects. Now, how do we do that? I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to say very quickly, structurally integrating and connecting the chains, transforming and aligning the supply chain, as we do for a lot of customers. Yeah, we do global supply chain transformation. We help them from supplier to the customer. We even close the loop for waste and valorization of products beyond the customer. So there's no reason why the palm oil supply chain could not be part of such an ecosystem. On the contrary, it will help a lot in actually getting all the SDGs we're looking at and we're discussing, and actually getting it done, or at least to create a framework in which a thing will work. Now, how do you set up digital alliance and value ecosystem, chain ecosystems? It starts actually with creating a joint strategic intent, develop a sound and strong governance model, provide access to data on equal basis, let the partners interact and share amongst each other in open or closed rooms, to communicate, and have the control tower to ensure that legal compliance with, amongst other, antitrust and competition regulations are taken care of. The keywords for us is partnership, trust, value, and control, and we can organize that. And that's also what we show in our proposal together with BASP, is actually, this is, I think, I really believe in the fact that this is actually a solution to start to build this ecosystem in which actually it's going to be simple for the government. It's going to be simple if you're attacked by a witch hunter, to put it like that, that you are using or abusing or whatever, then actually you can be able to show that, okay, I'm part of that ecosystem. That ecosystem is proof against the values and the principles we have set. What is a control tower? It's at the heart of the system. So it has a lot of functions, a lot of discussions. Again, it's all working as we normally work with supply chains, creating that closed loop, creating that ecosystem in which it is possible to have a secure trading platform with access to markets between the earmarked stakeholders. There's value dashboards, central planning. There's a possibility for designing and organizing management of sustainable palm oil projects. For instance, very much possible that the landscape projects could fit in this kind of setting. Also other ones, etc. Now, how does that look like? It's very complex. Why is that? Because it's a complex supply chain. It's not an easy one. So there are a lot of raw material producers, there are a lot of farmers, there are a lot of companies here. What we try to do is through that control tower is to upscale, reduce the cost of information, secure informed decisions on a daily basis can be taken by each of the steps in this, and they work not through the system. The control tower and the ecosystem is there to facilitate and to help basically the supply chain to work in a sustainable manner. So if you have a supply chain that works all together in the same way, you open opportunity for value creation, for reduction of costs, and basically to create that aim we all have of the people which are sitting around the table today, is actually to create that value chain. This is something more specific. How does it work? It's just more example. These are all the different things that can work, that can do. These are the suppliers, and basically they work, but they use the information which is in there, and it actually is going to create then, whatever, the trust, the agreement, etc., etc. Now, of course, there's a maturity curve. What is the traditional way? What we see today, still today, is long-term sales service agreements. This traditional way, it's not so much increased control, sustainable palm oil access, and rising opportunity for competitive advantage for the ecosystem members. The more you integrate, the better and the higher the opportunity is for each of them. What is an important role is the role of the government. In all the systems I have been setting up, the role of government is important. I always compare it with the emblematic animal of the country where I have been working. It's for instance, and there was a puma is the emblematic animal for Chile. Well, if the puma doesn't have teeth, it's a little cat which will not harm you. So if you have a very strong setting and you want to go for that really, then actually you need to work together with the government in either creating very clear governance statements. Also, the government and public authorities, they need to help and promote under whatever concept that this is a preferred way. You can work with economic incentives, economic instruments. You can basically create regulations which basically make it happen and deters the other one. The objective of the project, it's a lot. Yeah, it's about all those SDGs. We see that if we do it properly, and if we can only do it properly together with each of you, then actually we'll be able to reach those directly contribution, indirectly. There's an important critical success factor for any food system. Again, as I said already, there's a minimum level of governance, rule of law, which includes access to justice, which is relevant, important, and crucial to basically avoid that some activities might happen which are outside. Time is now. We are living, hopefully, the end of COVID, at least one of the series of COVID. It's like a Netflix soap opera. But actually what we see is that post-COVID markets, they will go to resilience-driven. So design for sustainability, selective push growth, and focus on resilience and profitability from current business models, whereas actually in the past, this was completely different. This only helps. That's probably the only good thing COVID brings us, is actually the mindset, the aim, and the focus of the world basically has shifted to create other ways of doing and managing supply chains. Thank you very much. And I end with Mr. Einstein, who's saying we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used them when we created them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christoph. And a systemic approach, by definition, is something you have to do together with others. It's, as we said, as Belgian Alliance, we have taken the initiative to also try and bring together our sister alliances in other countries with a vision on how we should move forward together. I'm very happy to present here now our colleague from Spain, Horacio Alemán. Horacio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jelmen. Well, first of all, I will introduce myself. My name is Horacio Alemán. I am the advisor for the Spanish Food and Sustainable Palm Oil Foundation. And first of all, I wanted to congratulate you for this very interesting Belgian initiative. So thank you very much, Jelmen, and of course, your president. In my view, sustainability is undoubtedly sort of the new mantra in our economy and more in our agri-food sector. Europe is embarked in its farm-to-fork strategy. We all know that. And in my view, this will change radically the European way of doing agribusiness. First of all, because we should forget this idea of agri-food chain, and we should enter in this new agri-food model or food system, as they call it, which is much more than just a food chain. This is my first comment. The second one is that at the same time, this farm-to-fork strategy will imply a huge regulatory wave that will affect not only production, local production, European production, but also, of course, imported products. In this sense, and in this context, measures to tackle deforestation will be soon on the table in Brussels. We have heard about this deforestation strategy, and the Commission is working on that, and we expect in the next months a draft regulation on deforestation. So this will affect directly, of course, palm oil, but not only palm oil. There will be also other commodities like cocoa or soya, for example, which are critical for sectors, very important sectors in the European agri-food economy, like, for example, confectionery, margarines, animal feed, and even meat production, and also others. So, in my view, it is time to react. The Commission is working on the regulation, as I said before, against deforestation, and palm oil should be or must be a front runner, working close with other commodities, in my view, and make the change, supporting and cooperating with the European institutions. Palm oil initiatives should get together at the European level. This is a good example, Jelmen, what you are doing right today. And this BASP initiative is a good demonstration of our willingness to cooperate, in my view. Spain has signed the Amsterdam Declaration last week, and this is a very good sign for all of us. We are really excited. This is a new impetus in Spain in order to cooperate and try to get a common point and a common initiative on the palm oil issue and deforestation. Our Spanish foundation will be cooperating with our colleagues and the representative of the rest of commodities in order to achieve this most unexpected European Union harmonized regulation on deforestation. So let's work together, let's share the information that we are doing here right now, information and initiative, and put the focus on Brussels, which is going to be the most important thing that we should do in the next months. Thank you very much, and congratulations again to BASP for this very interesting initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Horacio. And with this, we conclude 3 views on necessary elements to be able to move to a systemic approach, to move more toward this ecosystem approach. And I see that there are already questions coming in. The first question for Christoph. In your presentation, where are the agro farmers in this setup?
Thank you, Jelmen. Yes, no, I mean, farmer organizations and NGOs and etc. I mean, they are intrinsically part of the whole setup of such an ecosystem. They're not left out. It's just they're part of the ecosystem. They are part of the dialogue. They create together, but that's up to decide how you set it up. That's not up to me. But from my point of view, it's all the relevant stakeholders should be part of discussing. Perhaps I can just go to one slide just to highlight it, and I just need to share again. I think now. Where is this here? Share screen. Yep. Voila. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's obvious that they are. There's just one of the slides. You have the ecosystem. They're part. They're performance report users, NGOs, consumers, investors, other stakeholders. They're part in those settings as well. But in an ecosystem, you have, let's say, the supply chain itself, and then actually in the development of for instance, the KPIs, you can call it standards, goals, ways of working, etc. To have that discussed, obviously, there's a joint, let's say, intake of all kinds of here, this one here, yeah. Sustainable palm oil supply chain standards as government and other sector corporate related, which actually going to develop this. That can also be part of the projects which can be run together with. But again, that's a decision of the ecosystem. Ecosystem has a purpose to create a lot of yeah. It's together. But this is the supply chain, and they're not part of the supply chain, they're part of the value chain. Yeah. And what you see here is the supply chain. In the value chain, of course, they impact, as you know as well. They have a say. I didn't speak about cooperatives. I didn't speak about them now because we just had very short time. But in the setup, they definitely have a role in bringing this further. But what is important is that the purpose is that an ecosystem works. So there's going to be different rooms, different chambers, whatever you call it, in which actually indeed they're going to meet, they're going to work, they're going to present, propose, whatever. But in the end, what you look at is the outcome. So, and if the outcome needs to be sustainable, then actually this is what I want to show. Is you're going to have here the people working as suppliers, farmer, supplier, OEM, CPG, be it food or well-being, distribution, retail, sales, consumers. They actually are going to work according to basically what is in here. They're not going to work, but actually going to take into account decisions they're going to take according to. And if they all do that and they all align to those principles, then actually you have created the basis for a sustainable value chain. And obviously underneath there are issues or challenges or projects that need to take place. You need to have joint financing to help basically avoid that the small farm holder will choose to burn the field because that's the easiest way to actually get more money. There are other ways to look at that. And the question is, what is the value for me as an OEM? So as a company, what is the value for the farmer? But it's actually the willingness for the consumer to pay. And on the basis of that, you're gonna actually create that cycle, which is gonna be self-containing, it's gonna fund itself. That's actually, of course, the additional money which comes is gonna be fine. But in the end, in an ecosystem, you're gonna be able to say, okay, I work with, I'm sustainable. The role of NGOs and constructive NGOs and governments are key because they basically weigh either on the license to operate or creating the vision, whether or not there is a license to operate or put problems at the table. To have an ecosystem allows actually to have discussion, dialogue inside that ecosystem to solve and work together to basically solve the issue if there's an issue, but also to increase, to go for the next level. But in the end, purpose is that in the bubble, as this is a very popular word now since 2020, the bubble you create is a safe place to work, develop, and grow. I don't know if that's an answer.
Bubbles as a safe place is indeed a very 2020
concept.
Concept.
Let's hope it's not a trend, but just.
Let's hope it's not a trend, but indeed that we can all move forward from here. Thank you very much, Christoph. And we've talked a lot about forests at the moment, but what about human rights? Can human rights also be a part of this approach, or is it limited to forests?
Human rights is a key item. Again, I'll go back. Human rights, because the aim is that the aim of the whole setup is that we work against all the SDGs. Of course, okay, you can say human rights is not in there, but there's a lot of human rights which have to do with each of them. Human rights is obviously a very important item. This can be about depopulation. It can be about respecting the labels of ILO, etc. They're just intrinsic part of what you want to achieve. I mean, you cannot say I'm going to do decent work, economic growth, and work for good health and well-being, education, whatever, and at the same time you're going to say, but I'm just going to put everyone in slavery. I mean, that is not what we are aiming at. I think that's self-explaining.
The last question for you at this stage, Christoph. Do we need to develop new standards for this? There are already standards on human rights, on deforestation. Can they have a role in this, or do we need something new?
But first of all, it's about making sure they are properly applied and implemented, and to make sure that we get management control over it in that ecosystem. If there is a need for new standards, I think that is not up to me to decide. It's not up to me to say. But obviously, if there is a way of improving this transition to value chains, then obviously yes. But again, we are I'm not providing the input on that item, but for sure, the first step is to make sure everything is there. I think the Sustainable Development Goals, they're still goals. It's not achieved yet. Let's start with that. We have human rights. Human rights is also connected to the local constitutions, country constitutions, which are protected and not. We have the in terms of environmental, we have the ESCAZU in South America. We have the ones in Europe. That is all connected with access to justice. Now, access to justice is very neatly connected to human rights. That is to be seen, to be developed together in conjunction with the local authority and governments. But it's definitely, I think, an important thing. Yeah.
A question for Horacio. We see that the Commission is taking initiatives to bring together the cocoa sector. Could this be a solution for the palm oil sector as well? What could be a next step for our sector? Horacio?
In my view, the Commission is of course having a broader approach in the sense that many commodities will be affected, let's say so, by this regulation. And in this sense, of course, we are talking about palm oil, and palm oil is very important for all of us. But we should keep in mind that the more we are in the same line, the better the results will be. So I'm always open to cooperate with many other commodities in order to get the final outcome. And we all have, in my view, the same objectives. So cooperation is also key in this European initiative, in my view.
In a landscape approach, it as Babasola presented, there can also be different commodities present. Babasola, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, one of the very innovative technologies that we are using, one of the key approaches we are using is the source up, which I actually previously mentioned. Previously was called the Verified Sourcing Area. This is a platform in which connects key stakeholders on a jurisdiction to markets. So it's not just only about palm oil, but it's across cross commodities. So if you have rubber, or if you're planting growing rubber and palm oil in the same jurisdiction, you can have it as a verified sourcing area. The process entails having signed up to a series of compacts with key stakeholders in that jurisdiction that, okay, for deforestation, zero deforestation, NDP commitments. So it's not just only about palm oil, but it goes beyond palm oil. So if within, for example, we have a pilot program in Aceh, Tamiang, which is targeted at palm oil, but at the end, we aim to replicate it across across Aceh and across various landscapes, and not just only in Indonesia, but across Colombia, Africa as well, and in Asia. So sourceup.org, and that's one of our key interventions that we are using that doesn't just deal with palm oil, but across various food commodities or food chains. Thank you.
Mr. Hadi, we've had a few questions here already on how to bring these stakeholders together, how to bring all of these topics together. Different commodities, agro-farmers, human rights, forests. From a perspective of a government, how do you deal with all these interests? How do you deal with all these stakeholders?
Thank you very much, Jelmen. You're absolutely right that we have a lot of stakeholders in Jakarta, in Indonesia. You can imagine the palm oil issue is closely related with the industry that involves more than direct is more than 4 million people, and then indirectly is 16 million people that involved in that industry. And then definitely there is no other option that we have to work together. And then basically the system of work there is we have a smallholder, and we have a big industry. We are trying hard to ask them to sit together because, for example, for the smallholder, it's not too easy to get certification. I mean, it's for example for SPO or even ISPO, Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil. That's why the work together between the big industry and smallholder is a must. to subsidize, and then at the end, the smallholder and the big industry have this similar playing field, and others also, like NGO, the government. We try hard to have like many forums in Indonesia in order to them to talk each other, Pak Jelmen.
From all these stakeholders, zooming in on one specific group, 40% of the palm oil production is smallholders. Mr. Hadi, how do you deal with smallholders? Is there specific regulation that regulates how the multinationals need to work together with smallholders? How does Indonesia do that?
There is no specific regulation, Pak Jelmen, but I think it is on the field. Definitely, they work together, because for the smallholders, they don't have any processing plan to make palm oil in the higher product. That's why they always work together, because basically like a foster father. I mean, for the smallholder to have a big, yeah. So there is and definitely until today they work together. The smallholder supply the supply the palm oil, and then the big industry will process the palm oil for that purpose. But for the strict regulation, we don't have that kind of regulation, Pak Jelmen. But in the field, they have to work together.
Christoph, if I understood correctly, you want to elaborate on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing about the fact that smallholders have problems in getting certified, etc., etc. But obviously, if you have an ecosystem which is built, just to give an example, if you have an ecosystem, for instance, in Indonesia, for a sustainable supply chain on palm oil, then actually, if they have submitted or subscribed, that because otherwise they will not be able to do it according to their own standards. So basically, there will be a demand for having actually certification. And that basically means that that ecosystem and that control tower can actually help in getting actually small farm holders certified according to the rules which they have to apply to. And that's actually the way how you see growing that ecosystem, and then adhering to the same principles in terms of working, etc., etc. And also what you're not going to do is actually it's going to create that universe in which you're going to have that closed loop. So it's the one is going to trigger the other. Also working together is going to be triggered by the other, because they both see value in having actually that palm oil on the table or in a product at the end of the day. So that's the way how we have seen in many other projects that you create a market dynamic by doing that, which just goes then actually not going to say automatic. First you need to push and you need to pull a little bit, but at a given moment it's going to be self-containing, it's going to be self-propelling. And that's exactly the way how you basically can have then a support from the government. I believe is important that there's a kind of framework structure in which sustainable palm oil or sustainable cacao, whatever you have as raw material, as a resource, is actually promoted. That basically means that you need to be smart thinking how you're going to do that. So you need to find good ways in which actually the outcome is going to help the promotion of that palm oil, of that sustainable palm oil. Yeah.
Thank you very much. While you're there, don't unmute yourself just yet. There's a question about how to move and agree on ideal standards. Is it a static system, or do we need to continue moving? You called on government to agree on a system. Is that going to be sufficient, or how do you see that?
From my point of view, I'm just going to give an example from a completely different project I did already 8 years ago. That's in the small is also in detergents and in soap. We did that actually. It was in 2003, 2004. We developed for the European Association for Solvents Industry something which was the sustainable cleaning project. It's still the flagship. On every bottle of solvents, you will probably see a little blue, in the past blue earth, a globe with a little brush green. Now, what does that mean? That means that actually they are okay with sustainable practices from a risk management perspective. It's implemented, I think, in 350, 400 companies in Europe, big, small ones. And actually, that's a moving target. It's a moving target that you basically are able to increase the level where you want to be. Yeah. So you can create if you want, but that's not up to me to decide. But what we can do is we can develop maturity curve in which you start with 1, then 2, level 3, level 4, and you can leave it open to companies and farmers as far holders and NGOs, whatever, to discuss what are the minimum requirements, maturity you need to attain after so many months. Of course, if there's some years between the Monday and the Tuesday, it's static. Huh? The thing will always move, but there's a baseline, and within that baseline, there's opportunity for growth. And the control tower can make it clear in the flow that, for instance, farmer X is like you have.
Christoph, we are losing you. I propose we move to the final question. And meanwhile, for those that are interested, there is a speed networking session starting at this moment. The speed networking session gives you short times to meet other people that are attending this webinar here. For the others, we move to the final question. Mr. Ambassador, for some final comments. Today we see different approaches towards sustainability, and we've discussed a few here. How can these approaches be brought together? Can you elaborate on your vision for a way forward?
Thank you, Jelmen. Yeah, at the beginning, there's some concern, Jelmen, regarding the environmental aspect of the omnibus law. Some especially skeptical view from outside Indonesia that this big really this very important law is not friendly to the environmental issue, because the new law is not focused on the how to protect the forest and everything, but basically this law is really help us to elevate basically the one of the biggest challenge in Indonesia is regarding the permit and everything, the bureaucracy. So we would like to make sure that with this law, we would like to make sure that we tries to avoid the obstacle of the bureaucracy. You maybe understand, for let's say if there is investor that will invest then it's not easy to get the license and everything, and this is not only related to the only, it's not only related with the palm oil and other, but all sector also, and the government tries to make sure that we are trying to make easier to have a business in Indonesia. But on the other hand, still, for example, we have really enforcement and strictly like for moratorium for our expanding of the palm oil plantation, and the law is still there. So we don't need to worry about this omnibus law. We still keep intact with the environmental issue. We still protect and then but on the other side of the palm oil, definitely the law is still there for the moratorium. And then the Indonesian now focus with the Indonesian sustainable palm oil that really wants to make sure that all the palm oil producer obey the sustainability palm oil. So nationally, we have Indonesian sustainable palm oil certification done by the government, but for the higher and then in the different sphere, we have like a roundtable sustainable oil for the oil. That's Pak Jelmen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. And then I give the floor to our president, Mr. Thiry, for his summary and for his closing statement. Mr. Thiry, you have the floor.
I heard yesterday that Indo and Malaysia are going to join their forces to go forward in Europe to promote palm oil and especially to fight no palm logos. And I want to warmly welcome and thanks them to work on this file. It's very important to work on this, so thank you for that. I heard that the IDH initiative are working or promoting stop deforestation as soon as possible and increase yields. And I think it's very important and positive that IDH is working on that. Thank you to IDH for that. And we support this initiative for sure. Another point is it's a premium on SG palm. Could it not be possible to put in the origin countries a tax at the origin on non-SG palm to balance and help the people going to the SG process? I think it's important that we suggest this to the producing countries, build a tax on conventional palm oil. That's interesting to think about. Another point, in my opinion, is that the yields is the main engine to sort out many issues. It can give better revenues to the farmers. It's a great help for stopping definitively deforestation. And it's a great help to grow the volumes in the next years. So for me, the yield in the countries of origin is the main fuel to work on. I think also that the image or positive image of the SG palm or the global palm is only possible if it's no deforestation in the next field or somewhere else. We cannot in Europe promote SG palm oil if somewhere else palm oil non-SG is produced by deforestation. So promoting the palm is only possible without deforestation somewhere. And I think that it's important to increase the revenues for the small farmers, because it's only by increasing their revenues that they can go to the SG palm oil. This is possible by the yield. And I wonder if for smallholders, a system like co-certification or group certification or something like that could not be a solution for them to be able to produce only SG palm oil. That was my feelings, my conclusions, my ideas to grow together. And I want to warmly thank everybody who did attend, everybody who did speak or make a presentation. And yeah, I just hope you will continue everywhere you are to work very hard and to promote very hard too what we are going together. Let's say it in other words, if you can produce green palm, we can sell it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thiry. It's a very comprehensive and ambitious vision forward. It needs to be green and it needs to be sustainable, and then we will gain the trust of the consumer. We've mentioned it already. As BASP, we see a way forward here also in an EU due diligence, and we have presented today also our project that we've introduced together with PwC in the framework of the EU relaunch project, relaunch initiative, and we've elaborated a lot on how we need to work together to achieve this, and how for the next step and coming together in the next step, it is something we need to take together, it's something we need to do together. There was a clear statement there, a clear call therefore also from our Spanish alliance, from our Spanish colleague. And as Belgium, we have taken this initiative for this webinar just to bring together everybody. We will continue these initiatives and this outreach to others, to other key stakeholders, also here in Belgium, also in other countries. And we invite you also to contact us. We will follow up with more information after this webinar. And we will, of course, also look forward to any questions that you might have after this. Thank you very much for the attention and for the interest, and we look forward to staying in touch. Have a nice day, and until next time.